Annabelle Vessels, and are you ready to step into the arena? I've got Walker and Frank here from Rebel Public Games, and we're going to be talking about their awesome game, Arena Rex. Say hi to everyone, guys.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. All right. So, what's Arena Rex?
So Arena Rex, we call it Gladiator Combat in a Mythic Age. We have basically an alternate history world with some fantastic elements to it, but it's really all about gladiatorial combat in the arena. It's very positional, although facing doesn't matter. You can see later on the board we've got lots of pits and pillars and things to be pushed into, and so that's a lot of the focus of the game to kind of accelerate your damage. But it's a small scale skirmish game. You're looking at 3 to 6 models on the side for your typical game. We're going to do a demo game here with 3 models on the side, and we'll just play it through. ArenaRex.com, if you want further info, we have a full PDF of the rules online. We have all the info for the models, front and back of the cards, posted in their galleries. So our business is around the models themselves, but we think we've got a pretty cool game to go with them. So we hope you like it.
And these guys have some of the best models out there, I think, on the market right now, especially in the genre that we're going for. And they've got a really solid game. How long have you guys been in business for? How long has the game been?
We did a Kickstarter a little over 5 years ago. Ran from the Ides of March to the founding of Rome.
Right.
And that really went pretty well, a lot better than we were expecting. So we had a little bit of digging ourselves out to do, but then we opened our web store almost 4 years ago at this point. Started releasing some new models, and at this point we've got 4 full factions, quite a few models that are not part of any faction, and a couple sub-factions, and our next faction is going to be the Greeks coming out at Gen Con. So
getting all oiled up for that.
Yep.
Yep. All right. Well, let's get into the game.
right.
Let's show off that first. This is what we're here for. So we've got, actually, real quickly, let's show off some of the models to the camera, guys. So this is what we're talking about. So this
It's going to be
is
easier to do overheads.
yeah. Let's do the overhead. So show off some of the models we're going to be using today.
All right. So we've got Abe's going to be playing Ludus Magnus for us. These are kind of our more traditional style Roman gladiators. They're the ones who are in what remains of the Republic in our world. And so they are all going to be about focusing on the favor of the crowd and really driving that mechanic. These guys are experts at playing to the crowd, and they can use that as kind of a benefit to power some of their attacks.
This guy is Mycon, right?
Yep.
That's Mycon.
And he's kind of your big throw people around.
That's exclusive.
He is, he is the king of board control.
Yep.
And then we've got Inflix, who's going to be your kind of damage dealer for the most part. And we'll pass that over. And then Marcus Furious is going to be your upside down entanglement, pain in the neck option.
Right. Those are going to be my guys today. And what are you playing today?
I'm playing our Legio 13. So in our world, Octavian heads back up north through Gaul, founds an empire in Britain. Instead of becoming the first emperor of Rome, he becomes the first emperor of our Gallo-Roman Empire. So a little bit different there. We're getting all the angles right here. This is Aquila. He's kind of the living legionary standard for the Legio 13. They're the gladiatorial arm of the Gallo-Roman Empire's military, so they use it as a training opportunity. This is Gaius Palladus, who's going to be kind of their anchor piece. He's pretty tanky and can deal out a pretty decent amount of damage. But he's pretty slow, so you'll see that. And then Ban Luca is going to be their kind of denial option in terms of movement, and she has the highest armor in the game.
Wow.
So you've got some armor,
passive.
the highest passive armor in the game.
And
Yeah.
then let's not forget,
models that can get a little higher.
we've also got our nice lion here.
Yep.
Leo,
We've got Leo, who will not be a part of any faction. At this point, we're going to be playing him as what's called a living hazard. So he's essentially part of the terrain in this game. And you can take our beasts as part of your cohort if you're interested in doing that. And then they would activate like a normal gladiator would. But in this case, he's going to be sort of part of the board.
All right. And then just to show off real quickly, this is kind of what one of the cards looks like. You don't have to zoom in, it's fine.
Yep.
But just to show you real quickly, we'll do some more detail on this, but you're going to have your stat block on the top, which is your movement, your attack, your defense, and your armor.
Yep.
And then you've got your what do you call it, damage tree?
Yep.
Yeah, damage tree, which is kind of how you determine what your effects your attack have down here. That's unique on every model. And then you've got your hit points down here. There's some additional information there. Your name, some rules, and then you've got those rules explained on the back, and that's for every character. So pretty much every character comes, aside from some faction overall rules, every character is going to come with what they need to play on their card.
Correct. All the rules for each model are included with that model. And if anybody on the stream wants to kind of follow along, like we said earlier, all those cards are available. The full card art, front and back, are all available on the website, so you can kind of see a little bit closer, at your leisure, what we're talking about as we go.
All right, so the game.
So Arena Rex basics. We're going to start with a pretty basic scenario here. Just knock the other guy out.
Okay.
The start of the game, you're going to all line up on your side of the arena. Everybody's going to be in base contact with everybody else from their cohort, and then we'll move up and engage and knock people out as it goes. When it's your turn, you're going to activate a single model, go through their full activation, and then pass the turn.
Okay.
So there's 3 actions you can take when you activate a model. You can move, attack, or attack harder. So power attack is that third option. You're basically spending additional fatigue to get to re-roll any failed dice.
Okay.
So when you attack, you're taking your attack stat, which is on the top of the card, rolling that many dice. Everybody's always looking for a 4 up on the dice.
Okay.
So you attack, your opponent defends on a regular attack, so they'll roll their defense stat in dice. Any successes that the defender has will be removed from the attacker.
Okay.
So at that point, the remaining successes are applied down the damage tree, and that's how you determine how much damage you do or what effects take place. So we'll see examples of that.
And so if you guys are following along or looking at the cards, they have a number of different effects. Some of them are just straight up damage, a number that's going to be how many points of damage the enemy might take. Other ones are certain effects like pushes, redirects, other things like that. So we'll get into that.
Yep. And all the icons are going to do 1 damage in addition to whatever else they do. So that's one of the tricky things to remember as you're looking at the cards. Damage may look lower than it actually is in practice. So as you take actions, you're going to fatigue your models. Models start the game ready, so that no fatigue token. Your first move is going to be free. If you take additional moves or attacks beyond that, basically, then you're going to go to fatigued. Once you're fatigued, if you end your turn there, it's not really a big penalty. You can react, or you can remove it pretty easily. At the start of each turn, you're going to remove 1 fatigue.
Okay.
So as you guys start accruing fatigue, you'll have to decide who to remove it from, but you can clear it off pretty easily. If you push it, you can go all the way to exhausted, which is basically another fatigue. At that point, you can no longer remove it at the start of your turn. You have to wait till what's called a clear turn. A clear turn happens when all of your models are at least fatigued. So say we had this situation. In that case, instead of activating any models, because they all started the turn at least fatigued, I can't activate any of them, they would all stage down by 1. So I'd remove these 2, and then the exhaustion would go to fatigued.
Okay. And that is the important caveat, is that you are alternating in activations, activating 1 model, then your opponent activates 1 model. But unlike a lot of games that do something similar, where you take turns activating models until each model is activated once, Arena Rex does not work that way. Basically, the only limitation on what model you can activate is whether or not that model started the turn ready. So you could theoretically, by activating a model to fatigue it, then the next turn removing the fatigue from that model and then activating a second model, you could theoretically bounce back and forth between the same 2 models, activating them over and over again if you so chose. But one of the other things is you can react during your opponent's turn, which reacting always costs 1 fatigue as well. So typically if you're activating a model, taking actions with it, and then also doing a reaction during your opponent's turn, you're going to be gaining 2 fatigue for every 1 that you remove.
Right. And so reactions you can also only do if you're ready, and that's an important part of fatigue management as well, as maintaining ready models so that you have the opportunity to react.
Now, I've played this game before, but it's been
Yeah.
Probably more than a year
been a
since I
while.
played it.
Yep.
So I don't remember everything. But one thing I think that's important to point out is that while it seemed like the clear turn you were talking about, that's basically losing a turn to get ready your models. But some factions and there are some special things that happen on clear turns.
Yes.
So sometimes, like Frank was saying, you could bounce between two models, but sometimes you actually want to try to exhaust your guys to get to a clear turn. Because you do get benefits out of that.
There's a lot of the kind of more advanced strategy of the game comes in of like deliberately driving towards a clear turn, or even potentially denying your opponent the ability to react to an action that they thought they were going to be able to react to, so that you delay their clear turn by a turn. But that's one of those things that's kind of way further down the road.
Yeah.
All right.
And one more thing. So we got two types of dice.
Yep.
What's up with that?
So you've got your basic dice, which we're using our faction dice that we have available
These are
for
sweet.
your attack and defense dice. And then you're going to want a second type of die, which is kind of our economic resource, which we call favor. Favor is going to be a resource that you can spend during the game. You can add it to your rolls, and it's a double success if it succeeds, so you still need a 4-up for a success. But if you get that, then it's 2 successes instead of 1. And you can also use it to trigger other certain special abilities or effects. Particularly on a clear turn, that's when tactics come in, which are kind of your factional abilities, and those often require favor to activate. So both sides are going to start the game with 3 favor, so you've got an initial pool. Generally, you gain favor by taking damage. So most models are going to have a couple of boxes on their vitality track that have these laurels. As you mark off those laurels, you're going to gain a favor. Certain other effects will trigger it as well, but that's the most common way to gain favor.
Crowd's here to see blood.
Exactly.
All right, so let's get started.
All right.
Yeah.
So to start, we can go ahead and roll off for who gets to pick first turn. You have the option of going first
I'll
or
let you
passing
go
to me.
first.
All right. So at this point, I don't have anyone that's in range of any of his models. Everybody's got a 1-inch melee range. There are no ranged attacks. There are sometimes aura effects that are a little bit bigger, but everyone's got a 1-inch melee range and a 360-degree arc. So you don't have to worry about facing. It's all about position.
Positioning is very
Yep.
Right.
So the first thing I'm going to do is take my slowest guy and start inching him forward.
All right.
So again, that first move action is free. So
And
I'll move
everything
him
you
up
see,
4 inches.
Everything you see on this table has an effect. So it's not just the spike pits, the pillars aren't just for looks. Those are all things that we can interact with during this game.
Yeah, pits will knock you out. The lion will come and attack. If you get knocked into a pillar, you'll get exhausted most of the time. So these things are all going to play into the positioning game. And we'll go over those kind of as they come up. So
I do know that my Mycon guy loves throwing people in pits though.
all right. So now I've moved him. At the end of that move action is a trigger for one of your possible reactions.
Right.
So if you want to, you can fatigue one of your models to take a move action in response.
Yeah, I think I will.
All
I'll
right.
show that off.
So that'll interrupt my turn for you to take an action. Yeah, we'll just go.
All right. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to just move Mycon forward.
All right.
Yeah, let's just...
So something that is important is that not only does taking a reaction fatigue you, but regardless of whether models are ready, can spend fatigue or not, you only ever get 1 reaction on your opponent's turn. So there's some tricky things you can do to try and force your opponent to take a reaction to an early action, preventing them from reacting to a later action during that same activation. So there can be a lot of kind of tricky choices there as well.
Now at this point, if I wanted to, I could spend a fatigue to take a second move action, and then exhaust myself for a third if I really wanted to just sprint up to the middle of the board. In this case, I'm going to hold off though, and I'm going to pass the turn back to Abe, so I've still got Gaius Palladus ready, so I can react during his turn if I want to.
Alright. So, I'm going to go ahead and activate Marcus Furious.
Okay. So at the start of your turn, you can't activate a model that started with fatigue, but you can remove 1 fatigue to get him ready for next turn.
So I'm going to go pull him off. And then Marcus Furious is fairly quick. Well, he's quicker than Mycon.
Most people are quicker than Mycon.
I'm just going to run him over there.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and react to that movement.
Alright.
And I'm going to go ahead and move Aquila, who's kind of my high damage option, up here. Oops. Damage the model as much as possible. And by reacting, he gains that fatigue.
Right.
So now you can continue your activation if you want.
I think I'm going to pass.
All right.
Here. So we're just moving for positioning right now. One thing that's really cool about Marcus Furious I like is that he does have favor on his damage tree, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he can fairly easily accrue some favor by getting into fights there.
So we call that a flourish.
A flourish, right.
Yep. You'll see that pretty commonly in the Ludus Magnus faction.
Right.
They tend to generate more favor than other factions individually. They're all kind of the superstars of the arena.
Mm-hmm.
And then their faction tactics rely on that favor as well.
Right.
So they can spend more favor than their opponents. They can kind of outspend them since they're generating so much. And they can also spend their energy to whip up the crowd during a clear turn. Instead of spending favor, they can gain some favor.
Right.
So those are kind of the two big abilities for them. The big ability for me, if you're done with your activation, you're going to see in just a second here, because Legio 13, I'm going to remove this fatigue from Aquila. Legio 13 can move through and displace each other.
Right, because they're all moving in tactical formation.
Right, exactly. So they're used to working in formation. So I'm going to go ahead and activate Banluka. I could move her all the way up to where Aquila is, but I'm going to show this displace off a little bit.
Maybe we'll displace both.
I probably could, but Aquila's already far enough up. That's fair. So I'm going to overlap Gaius Palladus' base by just a little bit, and that's going to let me displace him. So when you displace a model, you place them back in base contact anywhere with the model that just finished moving. So I'm going to kind of bump him forward as we move up. So that's my move action. If you want to react, you can.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and react with that Lex over here.
Okay.
He is super fast.
Very fast. So he's going to go ahead and run over here.
All right. And then I will, at this point, fatigue Banluka to take a second move action.
All right.
And I'll just get her right up here, because she has some movement denial abilities that I want to try to take advantage of. All right, and then I'll end my activation. Comes back to you.
Back to me. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and clear that.
I'm sure I remember how that works.
And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to activate my con again.
Okay. So he's moved up. I'm not going to react to that movement.
I'm good.
All right. I will clear Banluka, and I will once again move Gaius Palladus. Now, Gaius is not a big fan of pits, so I'm going to keep him away from that, and I'll scooch up and displace Banluka just a little bit to get him in front. Any reaction?
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and react.
So even though there's a little bit of maneuver at the start of the game where nobody's in range, you've got the reactions to kind of make that meaningful. You always have a choice to respond, and those movement reactions can be even more powerful once you're actually engaged with people. So
it's kind of a slower phase of the game, but it's definitely important, because getting your models into the right positions when the fight actually initiates, and like getting a good initiation can really make a big difference. You know, like there's a lot of games where like you can win or sometimes you feel like you win or lose in deployment, and that's definitely not the case with Arena Rex, which is why the deployment's so simple. But like this phase of the game can definitely set you up for victory or defeat.
all right, and so you're done.
I'm done. Yeah, I'm done with my reaction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that was
Yeah.
That's
sometimes that
happens
can be tricky to track
all the time.
All right. So then I'm done with my activation.
Okay.
It'll come back to you.
Yeah. So how much pre-measuring is allowed in the game?
As much as you like.
All right.
Yeah, you can measure anything, anytime in Arena Rex.
All right.
No guesswork necessary except for the dice.
So,
And the dice will ruin you.
They'll ruin me. I don't know if they'll ruin
Yeah,
it.
that's true. I mean, well, yeah, they're definitely
Historically.
Say, Abe probably has the most luck with dice of the entire company.
I am the opposite of that for Red Republic, so
Generally, yeah.
yeah.
All right, so let's get in there.
All right.
We're gonna see this tricky stuff that we got going on over there with Legio. I'm gonna try to attack Mycon,
Okay.
and he's just gonna try to walk right up to you.
All right. So, Banluca has a reaction called Stall.
All right.
So I'm going to go ahead and use this kind of proactively.
Mhm.
You announced that you were moving towards her.
Mhm.
So once you hit 3 inches away from her,
All right.
then you're going to stop.
All right.
So I'm going to react.
Because Banluca is weird and special.
Yep.
3 inches.
And that actually ends that action.
Okay.
So now that's your first move action. It doesn't
Sure.
end your activation. So if you wanted to, you could spend a fatigue to continue moving
Mhm.
and then exhaust yourself to make an attack,
Mhm.
or just move up to get in better position or hang out.
At some point, I just need to load one of the computers with the Jeopardy theme.
Yeah.
You know what? Mycon is all about getting in there.
All right.
That's not wrong.
So Mycon's gonna move again.
Okay.
This is actually a good example of what I was talking about earlier about how it really matters that you only get one reaction. Because normally when you get attacked, what you want to do is you want to counterattack, which lets you roll your attack instead of your defense against their attack roll, which, you know, generally models have about twice the attack as they do defense, or sometimes even more than that. So that definitely gives you a benefit. But in this
Whoa,
case,
hey there, buddy.
Walker's already used his one reaction. So even if he attacks Gaius Palladus here, Gaius Palladus still can't counterattack because Banluca already used up his one reaction for the turn.
I am gonna exhaust myself, I guess. To
Okay.
attack.
So that was a fatigue for that second move,
Right.
and then an exhaustion for the attack. So as Frank mentioned, I've already used my reaction, so I'm just going to have a regular defense roll here.
All right.
I will add a favor, just because Mycon rolling hot dice can be problematic.
All right. I'm gonna add 3 favor.
That can be problematic.
Which is all my favor.
All
Normally
So-
you can only add 2, right?
Right.
Yep.
But
And that's per activation, too.
Right.
So,
Per activation per model.
yeah.
So
Right.
It,
So,
it can get a little...
but one of Ludus Magnus' special abilities is that
they can use it.
add-
Yep.
Yep.
So, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and add another,
All right.
because the technical order is the attacker declares then the defender.
Sure.
I kind of jumped the gun on that one, but
Defender can declare favor
Yep.
first. But
all right. So that's going to be what it is.
All right.
And do we? Yeah, we can just bring that right up in the middle here.
Put that right there for the moment.
Yep.
All right.
There's a pit underneath there. It may become important, but for now it's okay. All right. So.
I rolled pretty poorly.
And I rolled pretty okay.
Yep.
So, all right. So you've got 4 successes on the
Mhm.
attack. I've got 4 successes on the defense.
Right.
So Gaius Palladus successfully defends himself.
All right.
The attack does not go through, and Mycon is set.
Mycon is sad.
Now these 2 favor that I've spent and the 3 that you've spent are gone.
Right.
They're used up. So I have 1 left in my pool, and Abe would be out, except he's the first player to make an attack, so he gains a favor.
Bam.
So that gives you a little bit of incentive to break that early stalemate
Mhm.
and just get in there.
I remember actually way back in the day I was playtest. That was when I playtested this game. Was when we were talking. You guys were talking about adding that particular mechanic in.
Yep.
We also had like a first across the center line rule for a little while, and then we're like, what even is a center line?
Yes.
We can't do that.
Because I'm a douche, and I remember playing against these guys and be like, I'm just going to hide on the wall here and make you come to me, and I'll just kill you.
And that was especially back when the lion used to be able to just gain a fatigue to gain a favor whenever he wanted. We were like, yeah, that's a problem. We need to make that not happen.
So, speaking of pre-measuring, I'm
Mhm.
going to move this real quick.
Oh, yeah.
Because Mycon is exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
And that means
It's not
I
fair.
get a free push and a free success if I
Mhm.
attack him. So I want to see how far away he is from this pit if Gaius Palladus is pushing him. So he's just over 3 inches, which means I will need 4 pushes to get in there. 1 is free. I do have 3 on my tree, but I'm going to have to get 5 net successes to get down to that. That is dicey.
Pretty doable.
It is possible.
With no favor, it's going to be hard.
I've only got the 1. I'm not going to trust that. I'm just going to try to get through all of the abs that Mycon has. So I will go ahead and remove this fatigue from Banluca.
All right.
So she's ready. And then I am going to activate Aquila. So I'm going to go ahead and move him to here. And make sure I have a line there. The reason why I'm doing this positioning is because if you push into another model that's friendly to you, you gain a bonus success.
Right.
Banluca has an ability called Coordinated Strike where I'll get an additional bonus success if I push into her instead of Gaius Palladus. So I'm trying to thread that angle there.
Kind of shove them
It does
between
expose
your
me to the
friends.
pit a little bit, but if I can get all the way up there, then I can do some pretty heavy damage to Mycon.
Definitely.
And if I follow up on those pushes, then I can be in okay position. All right.
I'm going to go ahead and take a reaction.
Sure.
Mycon can't react at all because he's exhausted.
Yep.
So I don't need to save anything for him.
Yep.
So I'm going to go ahead and react with Marcus Furious here.
Okay.
And we're just going to bring him up to there.
All right. So he's fatigued from the reaction. I've only taken my move yet, but I am going to attack, so I'll go ahead and fatigue for that now. And I will not add my favor. Let's bring this back in.
You got how many attack dice?
I have 6.
6.
So Mycon has 3 defense. It's pretty decent. But he has no armor, so
I'm going to go ahead and add my favor.
All right. So there we go.
Ooh, that's not bad.
That's all right.
So that's going to give you, so you got 5 and you get a free one for 6, right?
Yes.
Right. So I do get 5 on my own. But I'm still going to get pushed around, but because of everything.
Yep.
It's
So
gonna
the
still
3
suck.
success, and then on top of that, a bonus push.
And I almost blocked it.
So it was very close.
If it weren't for the free success, he would have just blocked it.
Yeah.
The free success pushes him to 1 net, and as long as you hit, you get the free push.
Oh, why couldn't I roll that well on my
And so
attack?
this is actually going to be pretty rough because that push should get you into base contact.
He resists your push.
But, he does resist my push.
Yeah. So Mycon
Whoa.
is bigger than Aquila. He's on a larger base, so he actually resists the first push from the attack. He still takes the 1 damage because the push still counts as a damage box, but the actual effect of pushing him around, Mycon is just like, you're a little tiny man. Like, what are you doing?
I'm so excited about that coordinated strike for him.
That's what I'm here for, is to ruin all your dreams.
Tiny man, what are you doing?
So, damage is the answer.
Right.
So I do get the 1 net success. Aquila's first box is a 2.
Right.
So that'll be 2 damage, plus the 1 from the free push is a total of 3.
Sure.
Mycon has no armor.
So I take 3.
So you'll take 3. You'll mark it off from left to right
Is it
on the
okay to mark
vitality.
on here?
Yep. The cards are glossy enough that dry erase works fine on them.
Wet erase will stain a little bit.
Yep.
But, you just get sleeves.
All right.
I was honestly hoping I would take more damage so that I could get to my favor.
I was too.
You may have another chance.
Yeah, it's true.
And I think we're going to go with that.
Okay.
So you've got 14 health left. I can do that. So I'm going to exhaust Aquila for a second attack.
Okay.
Lots of times if you're attacking someone who's exhausted, a second attack is
This is the way to go.
kind of an open option.
Yeah.
So now you've burnt your favor. I've still got my 6 attack dice, and I am going to add a favor now that you burnt yours, because if I don't, this is going to go horribly. And I hope that I get down to my second push.
Too bad.
All right. It's not that bad.
3.
I got 3.
Either.
I've got 3.
And you've got 3. So another 3 damage to
Another
you.
3 damage. And that will give me my favor
Yep.
as I bleed all over the ground.
And again, that damage is from the bonus success,
Right.
from him being exhausted, and then the free push on top of that.
All right.
So, Keela, big spender, not a winner.
Whew. Whew. Well, so we both
Now,
made a pretty big
you
gambit.
did get down to where you marked a favor,
Mhm.
and Aquila has another special rule called Valor. So if I do enough damage to cause you to gain favor, I gain a favor
Gain a
as well.
favor as well. All right. Alrighty.
This is shaping up to be an ugly board right now.
So I
That's
only
gonna be
have
gross.
influx to
Right, he's the only one who's starting the turn
So
ready.
you could pop the fatigue off of Marcus Furious if you wanted, or you could deliberately leave it on there to try and push for a clear turn to try and unfatigue, to get you an opportunity to unfatigue my comp.
Mm-hmm.
But if you remove that favor now, there's a decent chance that he's going to have the opportunity for some kind of reaction during Walker's turn. So like it's kind of either or. Like leaving him fatigued guarantees you a clear turn on your next turn, but it also opens up a lot more options for Walker to try and run around and do stuff.
It does. But I think I'm going to leave him fatigued. We're
Okay.
going to do this. All right. So.
Flix is super fast.
Super fast.
Don't know if he's quite fast enough. Yeah, you won't quite be able to run him up to Idle, I don't think. Especially not without getting too close to him. Yeah, 3 inches. Keep you run along the edge of the pit, you'll be out of her range.
Yeah, you can avoid her if you want to, but you won't be able to get to Aquila
Without double
without
moving, at least.
That's fine. So I'm going
Runs over
to
there.
over there.
Okay.
Take a reaction at all?
Nope.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna remember.
Dun, dun, dun.
Okay. Trying to take advantage of that bonus for pushing into a friendly, I see.
Yeah. Yeah, let's try this tactic that I hear works so well. And then I'm going to exhaust myself to attack you.
Alright.
Everybody's going broke.
Now, unfortunately, Aquila's sort of out on his own right now. I was hoping to... Well, I could have followed up on those pushes, but I wasn't smart enough to remember it. So he is just far enough out of Gaius's range that I can't assist him.
Okay.
So if you've got a model that's ready and they're within melee range of the attacker or the defender, they can assist defensively. So I would have been able to fatigue him to assist. Yeah.
Alright, so I've got a 6 attack dice, and I would add my favorite to this.
Okay. I'm saving my favorite because this is just going to be ugly.
It's just gonna be bad.
Alright.
Alright, so 1 success. I've got 6. No, sorry, 4.
Yeah,
So I have 4 plus a net success.
Right. Plus the free one for exhausted. So basically, that just cancels Walker's 1, leaving you with 4.
Right.
Plus
What does
a
influx
free
even do?
plus a free push.
Yeah.
So the free push from exhausted, you can basically insert anywhere you want into the tree. So
Or before or after.
yeah. So his second thing here, the little loop thing, is a reposition, which
Right.
lets you move 3 inches during the attack. Now, if you had only rolled like 1 success, for example, like if you only had 2 total net successes, one of the things that you can do with a reposition is you can basically bail out of combat completely and immediately end your activation and recover 1 fatigue. But And this goes for pushes as well, because as you push them, you also follow up behind them. Anytime you break contact during the resolution of an attack, you stop resolving the attack.
Right.
So like he could basically do 4, or in this case 5, because of the free push damage, and then just bail out and go just down to fatigued if he wanted.
Mhm.
But in this case, because you have a pretty massive hit coming in, you're really probably much better off just stabbing the bejesus out
Just
of
stabbing these. Yep.
Because yeah, you've already got 4 net. If you use that free push to push him into Mycon, you'll basically be up to your whole tree.
Right.
And if you just do pure damage with that, you're gonna hit him for like 14, which I think just kills him.
Yeah, so I'm going to hit him for 14.
Yep. All right. So 14. I've got 2 armor and 12 vitality.
All
So that does it.
So,
Paid
it
off
does,
pretty well.
Push him into him.
does
follow
mark
up.
off 3 favor for me.
Alright, and bam, 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 net knives.
Yeah. All right. So Arena Rex, when you knock someone out, they are just gone.
Alright. So one of the things I do like about Arena Rex is that there are some systems in place to prevent snowballing, because it's a small game and it can be really easy with 3-on-3. If one person dies, suddenly at 3-on-2, it's usually easy. So one of those effects we've seen already is the favor effect. Even though I killed him, Walker got a ton of favor. I didn't get any favor for that.
In fact, you spent it.
So yeah, I spent it. So now he's going to have an advantage going forward, and I'm also all exhausted, so he's going to be able to whack me pretty hard. But you've also got, there's some like last man standing rules. Is that still true?
That is
Yes.
correct.
Yeah. So there are some effects that if there's one model left, they get some advantages, so that even if we get into that, it can be pretty interesting.
And the big things are basically as you take more damage, you gain favor, which can definitely set you up for a big comeback. The other big things for snowballing is you may have kind of noticed with the way the activation rules work, it actually really minimizes the advantage of numbers.
Right.
Like if you outnumber your opponent 2-1, assuming that both players max out their fatigue and just play to a clear turn without any manipulation of that.
Sure.
Doubling your opponent's numbers only gives you like it gives you basically 3 activations for every 2 of theirs over time, as opposed to double, and that also actually plays a big role in kind of evening that out.
Also, I don't think Inflex is going to make it this turn, because he's exhausted and kind of weak.
Yeah. I mean, if Gaius Palatus
We'll
decides
see.
to kill him, he definitely can.
I think there's a bigger fish to fry.
Sure, sure.
I'm not saying that would be the best choice for you, but
I mean, I think there's a decent chance that I might lose one of my guys this turn.
I'm gonna hope for 2.
Ooh, getting greedy.
Yeah, I am. The dice will not support it, but I'm gonna try. We'll go for 1 and see what happens. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and activate Gaius Palatus. He has not yet moved. He's not going to move. I will attack Mycon.
All right.
And I'm gonna go ahead and add 2 favor.
All right. I don't have any favor left. So I just
You
have
don't have any reactions. So.
just my 3 dice.
Yep. That could have been better.
Still not bad.
You need to power attack more.
It's still 5.
He's exhausted, so maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's not horrible.
So I got 3 successes.
All right.
That still
fine.
gives you three successes.
That
of your
does
own.
still give me 3 successes of my own. So, looks like I'm only getting 1. All right. So 3 successes gets me a push, 3 damage, and another push, and then a 3rd push from you being exhausted.
Right.
We measured last time, and you were just under, you were just over 3 inches from the pit. So it's not going to be enough pushes to pit in.
It's not going to be enough pushes to pit you, and so in that case, I'm actually going to take the damage on the first one, just in case I totally flub the second attack.
Sure.
Getting him even 2 inches closer to the pit makes it much easier to push him in. On your
So
next
my
attack.
abs do not give me any armor. So
I am the same size as you, so no more little man problem. And both of these pushes are going to come in. So first one, we'll get you to there. Now I can follow up an inch toward you. It doesn't have to be directly towards you.
Right.
So if I wanted to, I could come this way and engage him, which
Push
is
itself is always directly away, but the follow-up is just, you just have to get closer to them by some measure.
So that was the first one. The second one will also be directly away from the new position. So if I had a 3rd one, I could come around this side and start pushing that way.
Right.
But I'm not going to do
That's
that.
actually one of the things that makes Mycon so good at pushing, is he has a special rule that gives him a 2-inch follow-up on every push, which with the massive number of pushes he has on his tree, he can actually basically push somebody in a full 180
Right.
without even having to rely on any of his other tricks that let him do things like that.
All right, so that's going to be a total of 7 damage.
7 damage. Okay. So that's 2, 3, and then
2, 3, 1 from the push, and then 1 from the free
2, 3,
push.
4, 5, 6, 7. Is my favor back. He may not need to push me into the. He may not need to push me in the pit. He may just kill me.
Well,
This is the kind of things
or
that Mycon
you may
is.
not.
Mycon is
All right.
is real strong against one big hit. It's lots
So-
of medium hits that make him real unhappy.
Okay. All right.
I'll just support this one over here so that we're not worried about the pit.
I am going to go ahead and use my favor on this.
Now, I've already used 2 favor, so that's where your kind of activation limit comes in.
Right.
I can no longer add favor to this roll.
That's all pretty hot though.
Yeah.
That's gonna do it, I think. Unless I roll.
Maybe.
If
you roll them all,
I roll them all, you'll get.
then you'll
I
still
think
die.
he'll
still
still
die.
put you into the pit.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens anyway.
Because he has a
You'll
push.
get a push and a success.
Right.
So I don't.
Pretty close.
Yep. Pretty close.
But even at full successes, I would have gotten a push and then a success, which is another push.
Push.
So you will go into the pit. Because you were killed by way of hazard. Now, when you go into a pit, all of your vitality gets marked off, regardless of how much is remaining.
Right.
So because you got killed by way of hazard, I'm going to get a favor for that as well.
All right.
You will get any favor remaining on your vitality,
There's
though.
one more.
All right. And that was a second attack for Gaius, so he is now exhausted.
Now, does he have to follow up an inch to stay for the push?
He'll have to follow up a little bit
Okay.
to stay for that second push.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 'cause he only needs
got
to
a
be
big enough
within
base
his
that-
melee range,
Yep.
which is
Right.
still a whole inch.
Alrighty.
He's got a big base.
Alright. So now, both of your models are starting to turn at least fatigued.
Right.
So it's going to be a clear turn for you.
It's gonna be a turn
If I
for
can
me.
do this.
So he'll go down by 1 level,
Mm-hmm.
and he'll go down by 1 level. So now you can activate tactics.
Mm-hmm.
So the main tactics you have from your faction that's active is you can rouse, which you can have one of your models gain a fatigue to immediately gain a favor.
Right.
There are also some generic tactics that everybody can use that are in the rule book. The big ones here is, I don't know what the name of it is, but you can spend a favor to remove a fatigue from a model.
Right.
Recover.
Recover?
Yep.
Yeah, we just called it recover. I didn't know if we used
That's
some
what we
weird
did.
name
No,
for it.
it's not fancy.
So you can do that. You can spend a favor to take influx all the way down to ready.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing you can do is you can incite the living hazard.
Right.
So for that, you can only do it once per clear turn. You spend a favor, and you have the living hazard take either a move or an attack. So if somebody was already next to him, you could just incite him to attack them.
Right.
In this case, because he's not, you could incite him and have him move somewhere more advantageous to you. Or potentially, if you just didn't want to deal with him, you could just move him further away from the fight.
Sure.
And there's definitely a lot of sometimes the living hazard can get real dynamic.
Sure. So I think I'm going to spend my favor to recover.
Okay.
And in combination with that rouse tactic, another trick that Ludus Magnus can do is they can basically have somebody else gain a fatigue to get a
Right.
favor, and then spend that favor to remove a fatigue from somebody else.
So
So,
I
they
can
can
just-
kind of move fatigue between people.
I can just sit here for the next hour being like, I fatigue him to gain a favor. I spend a fatigue to remove a favor. I spend a fatigue.
If you really wanted to.
If you want to.
Alright, so that's my
I
clear
would
turn.
say I'm not going to stop you, but I will. All right. So for me, it's not a clear turn. So
Right.
Gaius is still going to be stuck at exhausted. I am going to go ahead and activate Ben Luca because that's the thing I can do.
Mm-hmm.
It's just about. I will move her, and again, I will take advantage of my tactic to displace Gaius.
And Influx,
Yeah.
apparently.
I find the best way to do the displacement is actually to move them and nudge the other model out of the way.
Where's the fun?
Yeah.
Alright. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to pull him back away from this pit a little bit.
Alright.
And then, just for aesthetics, I'll turn face, and I will attack Influx.
Okay. Now I can counterattack?
You can counterattack, which normally costs a fatigue. Inflix actually has a special ability called Countervail, where if you want to, you can spend a favor instead of the fatigue and keep him ready. But I don't have any favor. So, well,
I had to spend it to ready him so that I could counter.
Fair enough.
But that is why I wanted to spend that fatigue earlier, so I could ready him, because if he wasn't ready, I couldn't counterattack, and he would die.
Even by spending a favor, because even though it lets you spend a favor instead of fatigue, you still have to be ready to counter.
So this pit is not a threat at the moment. Bring this back.
So how does a counterattack work?
So counterattack, instead of rolling your defense in dice, you're going to roll your attack in dice, and then any successes that you have over mine would apply damage.
All right.
So normally if you outroll me on a regular defense, doesn't really matter, the attack just fails.
Right.
In this case, you have sort of a bonus kicker of potentially doing damage back to me as well.
And that's definitely a thing that happens sometimes in Arena Rex, is you'll come in for an attack and just bomb your roll, and your opponent will counterattack and just ruin you on your own turn.
All right.
That's a lot of when that okay, you're done, now it's my turn again, right?
Yeah.
Comes in.
You are counterattacking, so I'll go ahead and add 2 favor.
Okay.
Dun dun dun.
I don't have any favor to add.
That's why I'm adding 2.
Yeah. Will avail you nothing!
No.
Alright, so 3 successes.
Not counting the favor, it's perfectly average.
Yeah. Alright, so if I can roll average, I'll block the attack. If I can roll better than average.
Let's not discuss that.
That's average.
Alright.
So I'll block the attack.
You successfully fended off
The first attack.
my weak sauce.
Now the problem, what I think Walker's running into here is that he could attack me again. I'm pretty weak at this point, but it would fatigue both of his characters.
Yeah, then they'd both be exhausted.
And then he'd have to take 2 clear turns, because I don't think you have any flavor left, do you?
I do have 1 left.
You do have 1.
And he'd probably get at least 1 more when Marcus Furious ran in there and just
lights him up.
Reamed someone all the way out.
That's also fair. But
it is he might lose a model in the process.
It'd be a risky tactic to attack again.
You know what?
Might still do
We've got a decent amount of health and armor over here.
All right.
I'm gonna see what I can do.
Okay.
With these dice that so far have been excellent on the second attack.
So this is kind of funny because this game really is kind of atypical in a lot of ways, because both of you are playing like hyper aggressive, exhausting yourselves like constantly. So we're seeing a lot less counterattacking and a lot more exhausting than we usually see.
Yeah, he opened it up with my cons. So
yeah, but that was the first counterattack of the game, and we have 2 models already dead.
Defense is for suckers. All right, this is gonna go bad now.
Here we go.
Yeah, this is gonna go bad.
Dice
Make it
off
up
that
Probably
line
hit
attack.
for him.
Yeah.
So I got nothing. So I'm pretty
Alright.
sure you throw me into a pit.
I got 5 successes, which is enough to get 3 pushes if I am desirous of them. And I think I really only need 2 of them. So that'll be enough.
All right.
So we'll push you 1, we'll follow up.
Make it down to
Push you
down to your
2.
favor box.
No, I do not, because I only get 5. But he goes in a pit, so I'll go. The second one I will not follow up. I'll just hang out where I'm at.
Okay.
'Cause I don't really want to be closer to that pit.
Okay.
And then I don't need to worry about the remaining damage, because you'll take your
you're
whole vitality bar anyway.
Yep.
So push somebody into a pit, get a favor.
There we go. All right. Now
Marcus
I have 2
Furious
favors
is
for that
like,
lovely creature.
wait, what's going on?
However, he is now last man. Well, we'll just leave this here.
Yeah. So
he is now last man standing.
Mhm.
So last man standing gives you a full clear turn. So normally you only stage down 1 fatigue level. If you're last man standing, you clear off completely any fatigue, and then an activation.
Right.
So you can activate tactics at the start during the clear turn portion as well, and then you can kind of go ham during the activation.
And some models are definitely more powerful during Last Man Standing than others. Unfortunately, Marcus Furious is not one of those. Really.
That's fine.
He's still pretty alright though.
Yep.
Like he'll do fine, I think. You'd have to work pretty hard to get either of them into a pit.
Yeah.
Probably. You have any favor right now?
Me?
Yeah. Probably
So-
be better off getting the lion into the action.
Oh, it is my clear turn, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so first you have a clear, you have like a total clear turn, lets you activate tactics and everything, and then you get an
Right,
activation,
and then I get an activation.
which is really what makes it so potent.
What happens if you go past the end of your tree? Can you?
Normally, nothing. It
Okay.
just stops.
Mm-hmm.
One of Ludus Magnus's tactics is that they basically get a free flourish
They
at
get
the
a
end.
free
They gain a
flourish,
favor
sure.
Yeah.
if they go beyond the
Pseudo
end of the tree.
flourish.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't add an extra damage.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna spend a favor to move the line.
When you move the lion, you go ahead and use his same stat card that you would use if he was one of your gladiators.
Now, does being entangled with the lion affect you? Can you
Nope.
walk away from it?
You can walk away pretty freely. He's only going to trigger basically if your opponent triggers him actively.
Yeah.
So either by pushing you too close. Or
Living hazards are totally passive, but if you, during your clear turn, you can incite them, as we mentioned previously. And anytime you push anytime a model is pushed and ends up within 3 inches of a living hazard, the living hazard will activate and then attack them. So those are the only 2 situations under which a living hazard really does anything other than just sort of take up space. But once a living hazard kind of gets into it, those 2 things happen a lot.
Put it there.
And now the lion has the living hazard is into it.
Yes.
And then I'm gonna activate and move over here.
Okay.
No, the move is free. So
Sure,
he's
that's
not
true.
fatigued.
You're right. Good call.
Attacking the fatigue.
Yeah. If I want to do that, totally want to do that though.
Yep. Unless you want to be ready to counterattack during my clear turn.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Alright. I'm going to attack. Now, you mentioned there's something called a power attack in this game.
Yep.
What is a power attack?
So a power attack costs an additional fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of fatiguing to make a regular attack, you go all the way to exhausted.
And you have to be ready to make a power attack, so you can't do one when you're already fatigued.
Right.
And it lets you re-roll any failed dice on the attack.
Okay.
And that includes any favor that you add to the roll.
And you found, alright.
So if you could have on that big attack you made with Mycon, if you
Right.
hadn't had to fatigue yourself to move
Get in
in,
there. I could've
that's
power-
100% when you want a power attack, is when you're like, you know what, I've got 3 favor to burn,
Right.
let's make it happen.
So, I am going to power attack.
Okay.
And I'm also going to add a favor to this.
All right. I too will add a favor to this.
Alright.
Just to blunt it a little bit, hopefully. Probably not going to help, but. Nope.
Called it.
All right.
So that will give me a total of 6 successes.
Yes, it
Right.
will.
So he's exhausted.
Mm-hmm. And my tree is only 5 long.
Right. So you're
Yep.
going to get a favor back because you went off the end of your tree.
Right.
So you get that Ludus Magnus flourish.
Get that with this Magnus Flourish. And then I get to push you. Get a bit of free push.
Wink.
And pushing you multiple times into the line will have no additional effect?
No, it's just
Okay. Just need the one.
So then, how much armor do you have?
I have 3 armor.
3 armor, and how many hit points?
10.
10.
big hits like these are what she does not like.
Yes.
She's sort of the opposite of Mycon in that
Yeah.
way. She's really good against a lot of little hits, but one big hit can still just kind of put her out.
Actually, I think I don't even need to push you into the line.
Usually Marcus without aid dice is
Because I'm doing, because I get 1 from the free success,
not as vicious, but
and then I get, so I'm going to do 12 damage total.
that will leave you short by 1.
Oh, she's...
Yeah, she's 3 armor with 10 health, so you need
She's
13.
3 armor.
Yeah,
Okay.
you need 13 to pancake Ben Luca.
Okay, so I can't quite pancake her, but I can. But the line gets.
Yeah,
attacked.
the lion's gonna attack, so like
It's bad news.
he's pretty bitey.
And the lion, and you still count as exhausted against the
Oh,
lion, correct?
Yep.
Um.
Being exhausted in your hazard is a bad time.
Okay. So in that case, I'm actually going to just do, I'll do 10 damage to you, and I'll get the favor
Okay.
on my tree.
All fair, and I would almost do 7 bailout.
Yeah, that's an option
Take
too.
the fatigue down. But nah, you're probably fine. Yeah.
All right, so 10,
10
before armor or 10 after armor?
10 before armor.
Okay, so 7. We'll get 2 favor off that.
And giving favor is definitely very cool. Like in some ways, like because of the way Last Man Standing works, you almost actually kind of don't want to kill her.
Right, no, that's I'm probably going to, unfortunately.
Yeah, like because that puts
no.
Gaius
However,
Palladus into
yeah.
Last Man Standing.
Yep.
He's like super gross.
Yeah,
in Last Man
I
Standing.
know.
Alright, so I've got 1 favor left to spend during her activation, and I will do so.
Alright.
So Theo's attack 6.
There we go.
Oh, Van Luca's feeling some lust for life there.
Alright,
Yep.
so we 1 net success because I get a free success.
Yep. So it's
So-
1 and a free push.
And a free push. So what happens if the lion pushes you back into me?
Nothing in
Nothing.
particular,
It's
because
not
he's
stop.
not actually
Yeah,
a friendly
no.
model. He's
Yeah.
a hazard. So he just
Sure.
kind of bounces you into there, because you don't have the option to not push.
Right.
And he'll hit for 4 damage,
Mhm.
because you're going to do the 3 plus the 1 for the free push, so
Yep.
you'll mark off 1 more from that.
So
that's
you successfully don't
actually
kill her.
about what you wanted to
All right.
happen, really. Like, ideally, what you would do at this point is get lucky, not die over the next couple turns, and somehow manage to get rid of Gaius Palladus and leave Van Luca with like 3 health as his last man standing.
Right.
Alright. So that's the end of your activation,
Is the
because
end
you
of
were
my
exhausted, so there's
Yep.
nothing else you can declare. It's going to come to me. It will be a clear turn. Both of these will stage down 1.
Mm-hmm.
Gaius Palladus will use his regrowth ability to heal Van Luca for 2.
Mm-hmm.
This is part of why he's so gross during Last Man Standing, because when he's the last man standing, that triggers every clear turn,
Right.
which is every turn.
I will also spend 1 favor to recover her fatigue.
Okay.
And that is the end of my clear turn.
Okay.
And so now it's on you again.
So first off,
Yep, he loses all of that.
all of that.
And you can spend one of your favor to have Leo just make an attack,
I
because
think
he's
I'm-
already in position.
I think I'm going to. So I'm going to have Leo attack big
Gaius.
guy. Guy's
Yeah.
close.
So Gaius is fatigued, so he can't counterattack. Walker could choose to assist with Van Luca.
Can you take reactions during a clear turn?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. From your opponent's perspective, a clear turn is just a turn.
Okay.
Gaius is doing
I guess
alright
that's
right
fair,
now,
because all my
so
turns are clear turns now.
Right.
we'll let it fly.
All right.
Bad kitty.
So 4 successes, 4 net successes here.
4 net successes.
Yeah, so pushing him doesn't really do... Well, actually, I mean, you could start pushing him towards that pit if you wanted to, because he's not getting it. He's not resisting any of your pushes because you're bigger than he is. So you can potentially do a couple pushes, or if with 4 net successes, if you just did straight damage, you'd hit him for 9 and gain a favor.
I could push it.
Or if you did 2 pushes, you'd hit him for, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, just 5. But you'd still gain the favor, and you'd do 2 pushes. Which that would actually be getting him pretty well into that vicinity of that pit, so.
He does have 2 armor, so.
True. Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't be doing a lot of damage to him, but like, killing Gaius Palladus with damage is kind of
enough
a
to get me a
long,
favor.
long road to hoe no matter what.
So how does moving when you're engaged matter? Does people stop me from me or anything?
There is a reaction
Mhm.
that lets you make an opportunity attack
Mhm.
if someone declares a move action and they're already in your melee range
Okay.
and you're ready, because you have to be ready to react. That is the closest thing to any sort of free strike we have in Arena
Okay.
Rex. So generally you can move through people's melee ranges pretty freely.
Okay. But if I tried to walk away, you could just stab me.
Right. Yes.
Well, and Marcus Furious specifically, because he's got the net, he does have a special
He
called
does.
Entangle,
Right.
where if you want to leave his melee range, like walk out of his melee range, you have to gain a fatigue to do so. So he has some basically all our Rotarius guys, or Rediarius,
Yep.
pronounce it wrong. They have a variety of different rules that typically make them a little harder to maneuver around.
And it's only if I declare a move at all when I'm in your melee
Yep.
range. Okay.
But that is a reaction.
That is
So
a
one of the ways,
sure.
if you want to more gracefully disengage, you can always like attack them, get them to counterattack to burn their reaction, and then bail out.
No.
I mean, that's really a win for
Yeah.
you. Like, if you attack your opponent, they're like, I'm not going to counterattack, so you can't run away. You're like, great.
So I have 4 successes.
I trap myself with that all the time.
It's, yeah. There's definitely a lot of areas where you'd be like, I'm being very clever, and your opponent's like, well, I just do the obvious thing. You're like, well, I am less clever than I thought. Yeah, I mean, like, it basically comes down to like whether or not you think you can get him into the pit before he just like moves somewhere else.
I mean, almost certainly not, because I'm not good at pushing people.
Right. Yeah, if anybody's pushing him into the pit, it's going to be Leo. So probably just doing a bunch of damage is your best.
Yeah.
I mean, hitting him for 9 is not a small amount.
Yeah. I will.
Okay.
It's like half his health.
Go ahead and hit him for 9.
All right.
And you gain a favor for
9
that as
minus
well
2
because
is
of the favor from
7.
Leo's tree.
Actually, hang on. No. I can push you.
You're
If you
directly away.
Yes, it's directly away, and he can move an inch.
Correct. And he'll follow up 1 inch.
I can do it
You are not quite in the direction of the pit.
then. I'm trying. It's not toward the pit.
You're just trying to get him into melee with Marcus Furious?
Yeah.
Oh, you almost certainly can.
Can
I think so. So we'll push him right here, and then you'll be able to move probably over to here, and then we'll push him kind
Well, he's already pretty close to an inch away, so that's just the question.
Like, if that's something you want to do, I'm pretty confident you can make it happen. But
What do you think? Can I make that happen?
I think so. Let's just do it then. So if you did that, you'd be like, you'd be like right there, which would put it like right there. He'd be able to move to like right there. Yeah, now I'm pushing down your right. You wouldn't quite make it. So yeah, you just hit him for 9.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Great success.
Yep.
Close enough.
Yep. All right.
All right.
And that was just Leo.
Yep.
So now you get your turn.
So that was my
I
turn.
mean, that's the other thing is you can also just like poke Banluka to get her to do things and then like walk into melee. Or you could just pass and wait to counterattack. Or you could rouse, get another favor. There's many options.
There's only blood in this game. All right. So I'm gonna move.
Not untrue.
All right. Then in that case, I will opportunity attack.
All right.
Da-da-da. The Walker's gonna roll terrible anyway.
It's true, but I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, so the downside to getting an opportunity attack on you is that not only is it an attack with a free success on it, but it's during your own turn, and you can't react during your own turn. It means it's always just against your defense. So, do eat.
I'm gonna go ahead and add it.
Yeah, me too. All right.
Yep, there's the Walker we know.
There it is.
4 successes.
All right.
So
Well, I
I'll
got
block it.
3. So
Damn it! I kept on.
He's like, I've got this shield on my back explicitly for this purpose.
my dice only do amazing things when they're not supposed to.
So I'm gonna go here.
You're like, I definitely won't kill this model
Yeah.
and put you in the last minute. Oh, well, 7 successes on 6 dice.
And then I'm going to power attack.
Okay.
Nice.
And throw in 2 favor.
I am going to suffer.
Hopefully.
So, you know, if he hadn't done that opportunity attack,
alright.
he could be assisting
Right.
Palladus right now.
Yeah.
This is what I'm talking about, with baiting out those those reactions.
Oh god, power attack. I saw those dice and I was like, yeah,
You're
alright,
like,
alright.
Yeah, oh wait, no.
Yeah,
no.
Not as bad as it
Give
could have
me
been.
5 net successes.
Yep.
But there's no point in pushing you because I'm not getting any free
Yeah,
pushes.
because he will resist your 1 push, unfortunately.
We've got a question from the chat.
Oh, all right.
Got a guy who says he can't wait to play this at Gen Con this year.
Excellent.
Will you have Kato's mount out by then?
Yes.
We should.
Later on, I think he's supposed to be going up on the
Even if he's not
soonish?
released before then, we will have some at Gen
Yes,
Con.
definitely.
So,
Okay, but
Quite possibly sooner than that online,
Yeah.
but we'll
I think looking at it, I only need to do 8 to kill you. Is that correct?
that is correct.
Okay. So then.
by varying levels of correct.
For a certain definition
For
of
now.
correct, yes.
So I mean, I can't doing more than 8 won't matter.
Right.
Correct. Okay. Huh.
Yeah, so you could just hit him for 8 and then bail.
And then bail. Or get him for 8.
Which is not the worst idea.
Get him for 8 and get a favor.
How many favor you got right now? Just 1.
1.
And he is going for a clear turn next turn. I'd probably get. I think probably the favor.
Yeah. So I'll
Well,
hit you
that's the right
for
call.
8 and well, I guess
Okay.
technically I'll hit you for
More than 8.
more than 8.
All right.
Get
So-
a favor.
The last
With
box
flourish.
on Gaius' Vitality is marked with a star. A star always points to another ability on that same card. His star ability is Undying. So the first time you mark his last Vitality, he comes back with 1 health. So mark that and unmark it.
So at the very beginning, when he mentioned the guy's Paladins doesn't like pits, that's actually why. Is
Right.
because pits are the best way to get rid of him. Because if you throw him into a pit, he marks all his Vitality, which triggers Undying, so he unmarks his last box, and then he's still in a pit. So you just mark it again, and he's still dead.
All right. So now it's a clear turn for me. That will happen. Gaius will regrowth on Ben Luca.
That's right. 'Cause I don't think that extra 2
Yeah,
is
he's-
gonna save guys.
Well, it might, but
Yeah, I don't think it's worth it.
it's not. All right, it is to you.
Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and get this back. And I'm going to rile Leo. Try
That's
to,
late.
yeah, I'm going to side him to try to finish off Gaius, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm gonna counterattack.
Alright. Kill the lion!
One of the things I tell people during demos all the time, like, if you can counterattack, unless you're real sure you don't want to, do it.
3.
Medium.
I got 4.
You know, that 2 health would have saved him.
It's alright, it's going to be more valuable on a last man standing bandit.
It is, it is. So, death by hazard.
So that's 1 more favor back to you.
Alright. And then I'm going to go ahead and move over here.
Sure.
Another power attack.
Yep.
Okay.
And I'll use with 3 favor.
Oh god, you have 3 now?
I have
Why?
3. Let's try to finish this.
Okay. Anticipate this ending poorly. I did what I could.
Did what you could. Alright, so that is going to be 7 net successes.
Yep.
So that's my tree.
That's
Yep.
more than enough.
I'm going to push you in. Well, how many I probably just
9.
kill you out, right?
Yeah, I don't think you
damage.
can not kill her.
Yeah,
at
so I'm
this
going to do.
point.
Yeah, so.
It's another important thing about the damage tree is you have to take boxes if you have them.
Right.
Right.
So
You
unless
have
you're
to
breaking
resolve pushes
contacts,
if you have
Right.
and
And
sometimes
sometimes-
you've got a push that you don't want to resolve,
Right.
you've still got to
You still got
resolve
to push
it.
him. Now, sometimes it is beneficial not to follow up on a push or to
Mhm.
disengage and to cut your tree off if you're
Yep.
trying not to get them down to last man standing or something
Yep.
like
Yep.
that. But in this case, I will just stab you with it. Right in the face.
Because winning is
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, good game.
So That is
Yeah.
Arena Rex.
That's Arena Rex, guys. I think
At least one iteration of it.
Yeah. I mean, we showed up. I think you got to see a lot of the different aspects of the games.
Mhm.
We showed off some of the tactics. You saw a lot of hazards, actually, both pits and
Little sad
lines.
Mycon went early.
Yeah.
I always like to see that, especially the demo games. I always like to see them with Mycon going crazy. and just,
Mycon,
like, hurling someone all the way across the
Yeah.
arena.
especially Mycon Last Man Standing,
Yes,
is
he's a blast.
So what they're talking about, Mycon, if you haven't seen his full card here, he's got, what is it, 3 pushes and then his some throw things.
Abe, if you want to throw that in the middle of the arena, I'll go ahead and do a close-up now. Slowly but surely.
Yeah, so Mycon's deal that he's got going on, not only as you can see from his tree, he's got 3 pushes in a row right at the beginning. So he's already really good at pushing. He has that momentum rule that we talked about that basically lets him ignore the size difference. So
Right.
even if he was pushing around like Leo or something, he doesn't care. Leo's bigger. It also gives him a 2-inch follow-up, so he can really shift around his position. This 4th box is actually a fatigue up, is what that is. So if he gets to that one, he causes you to gain a fatigue.
Right.
Then this last one here is the big one. So he's got this star, which is Atlas throws, where he just picks you up and throws you a D3 inches across the table.
Right.
And that's even more. The other thing that's important with that, it really only comes into play when you get Atlas throw, is reversal. So what reversal does is you still basically count down from the top to determine your total effect.
Right.
But once you've determined the full effect, you can resolve it from reverse order.
Right.
Now, obviously, if you don't get all the way down to the bottom and get Atlas throw, that's irrelevant, because fatiguing up and then pushing 3 times is exactly the same as pushing 3 times and fatiguing up.
Right.
But with Atlas throw, because it lets him pick you up and throw you a D3 inches in any direction, it allows him to do some really wacky stuff. Like, normally, say if you had a thing like this, or where you can see him. So if you had something like that, where he was on the wrong side of a pit, if you had to do 3 pushes first, you would have to basically go push, and then he could kind of like shift over to the side,
Right.
push again, and then shift over to the side, and so on and so forth. But with Atlas throw, he can potentially pick him up, throw him over here, and then push him into the pit because of reversal. So, like, he can, if you're going after an exhausted model, he can potentially get some. I think its maximum distance is like 6 inches or 7 inches across the table.
Yeah, 7 if they're
So
exhausted.
you can be in a situation where they're like way over here, and they're like, "Oh, I'm safe from a pit." And you're
Right.
like, well, actually.
I was kind of hoping I could do something real cool like that.
Yeah, if you'd
in
rolled
one of-
if you'd
yeah.
rolled a lot better on that first attack, you absolutely could have just picked up Guy's Palatus and been like, "I had first attack of the game, you're in a pit."
Yep.
So,
So
but it didn't quite work out.
that didn't work out. Do we have any questions? We want to get Larry in here and talk for a minute or anything?
Swap cameras back
Yeah.
over. So just kind of as a general question, not so much in the game, but what led you guys to start a game company?
People weren't doing gladiators that we liked. That was most of it.
So Russell
It
Crowe
was-
is probably what I'm hearing.
It kind of did come out. It was around then, wasn't it?
It
when
was
first
a
started?
little after that. Yeah.
Or
it
no,
was,
it was
really Spartacus.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
So that was ongoing when we sort of
And
really
Rome.
had it hot in our minds, and Rome as well, yeah. And so we, had all been playing games together for a while, miniatures games for years and years, and we were not finding gladiator minis that we liked. So we initially thought about just doing a miniatures line, and then we thought about just doing a game, and then was it going to be this game? It turns out yes. And yeah, so that was really the start of it. Is we kind of saw that hole in the supply, and thought, well, no one else is doing it. Why don't we go ahead and give it a shot?
And you guys were kind of lucky. You were kind of on the earlier edge of Kickstarter, really big Kickstarters. Right?
Yes, the timing was pretty fortunate. And,
Kickstarter was definitely less inundated with new miniatures lines back then.
well, and there hadn't been as many big failures either.
Right.
So people were a little freer with their their Kickstarter dollars at that time. I think that, you know, if a company was out of nowhere and doing what we were doing with what we had at that time now, it definitely would not be as successful.
Right.
At least for that initial Kickstarter run.
Yeah, and that was very successful. How long did it take you guys from like beginning thinking, hey, we want to do this, till the Kickstarter launch, till the game came out?
We worked on stuff for about 2 or 3 years before the Kickstarter came out. So we had done a whole lot of concepting of various models, and it still was not nearly enough for what the Kickstarter demanded.
Right.
So we were sort of scrambling for the back half of the minis.
Right.
That a lot of them kind of had a vague idea of what we wanted them to be.
What was it? Zara and Sarakat, like.
Yeah, Zara and Sarakat actually came out of the Kickstarter comments. Somebody requested a Scorpion Rider, and we decided that was rad. So,
And then,
yep.
Yeah. So how big is the range right now? How many models are there?
We've got something like 40 models.
No, it's more than that, I think. Is that?
Well, it depends on if you count the Greeks or not. It's a little over if you count the Greeks. But
It's like 40 to 50.
yeah. I think we've got like 50 SKUs, but some of those are dice and starter boxes and stuff like that. So.
And some of them are this man-sized models you see here. Some of them are a little bigger. Do you have any of the bigger models?
Oh yeah,
let's show off a couple of them.
Yeah.
We've already got it all zoomed in here.
Hey, I've got a favor to ask. Could you take down some of the walls so I can get a little bit more reflective light in there?
Sure. We can just pull the whole
In
thing
fact,
off.
yeah, let's just do that.
It's pretty light.
That'll be easy.
Alien invasion.
Thank you very much.
That's
I was creating some extra shadows that didn't need to be there.
Arya's on the floor behind you, Walker. So
And while you're getting it out, you guys have started doing like competitive play now, right? You have some tournaments and
yeah,
stuff?
we've run a couple tournaments now. We did our first one at, what was it, Adepticon? Is that
First
right?
one was Adepticon.
Last, not this year's, but last year's.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, we did. It was a 16-person event.
Yes.
Yeah. So we did a 16-seat tournament at last year's Adepticon, and then we did a 32-seat tournament, I think, at the following Gen Con.
This way. This way.
There you go.
So this is Zara and Sarakat. This is our Scorpion Rider. Zara is the person. Yeah, so they're pretty cool, and this is one of the things I tell people sometimes when we're at cons. I've been I've been in the miniatures hobby for a fair amount of time. I've looked around for models for D&D and Wargaming and all that kind of other stuff. I can say with absolute confidence, this is not only the most anatomically correct Scorpion model that's ever existed. It's easily the best giant Scorpion model that's ever existed. And I say that from experience. I've looked.
Yeah.
I was going to comment earlier. Y'all have some of the best models in the industry right now. Can you tell us a little bit about the design process?
Yeah, so we have been, to kind of start that conversation, we've been really lucky to work with some fantastic artists all the way through the process. And that has made a huge difference. We have, I think, a dozen or so sculptors throughout the range, and a handful that we tend to work more closely with now. But our process generally starts with what would be a cool thing, and then how do we twist that to give it a little bit more flavor. So a lot of the factions that we have are kind of blending multiple influences, and that's part of that initial design process. So that's kind of the first step is what kind of 2 or 3 things can we mash together that still feels like a coherent concept. And then how do we develop that further? What other stuff do we want to throw onto their kind of armor plates or various other influences there? So that kind of all leads into a concepting process for the character. All the models in Arena Rex are characters. They're all named.
They're all, even the mounts are named.
Even the mounts are named. The beasts are individuals. So we go through that process, and then there's a sketch that we'll prepare, usually with some photos as kind of reference material a lot of the historical stuff. We try to bring in photos if we can. We'll send that off to a concept artist that sends us back a couple of sketches, generally posed sketches. We'll pick one that we like for them to flesh out. We will send that entire brief, including everything that we have thought of along the way, to the sculptor, so they get kind of the full picture from the start. And so I think that helps as well. They don't just see the art and say, okay, I've got to make this thing. They see the art plus all of the different stuff that we've kind of thrown into the sink along the way, and stuff that we decided we didn't like as well. Sometimes we'll see like, not that, but yeah. So that's kind of the process for the model itself. For the rules design, there's a couple of sort of classes of gladiator that we tend to focus different ways. Frank was mentioning earlier, the Ready Aris is a great example where we try to give them some sort of movement control ability because of the nets and the spears. But aside from that, it's really open-ended. We kind of just think about what abilities would be fun to play with and would not be awful to play against. So there are a couple models that have pretty brutal abilities to play against, but we try to make sure that number is small, and if they are tough to play against, that at least they are clear and concise. Yeah. So,
and a lot of the stuff you do is based on, at least semi-based on historical stuff. You mentioned like Ready Aria; those are actual gladiator classes. You guys try to represent the actual groupings and classings of gladiators in some way. I know you guys have talked before about like the monsters that you see in the arenas, things like that. Most of those are either ones like a lion that you actually would have seen, or they're ones that they might have presented in like an allegorical way in the arena, and you guys tend to make them a little more real in your mythic gladiator stuff.
So our sort of rule for what is in line with Arena Rex thematically is if the crowd would believe that something is true, then we just go with it and say it's true. Right. So we originally, when we were first thinking about what we wanted to do with them, we were talking about maybe a chimera is just like a dog with a goat's head strapped onto it, and the crowd believes it's a chimera, so it's cool. And we thought about doing some kind of cheeky stuff like that, but then we just decided to go with it. Proximo's a great example. Let me see if I can dig him out. The questing beast.
Yeah.
Originally described as having the no, that's not him. As having the long neck and the tongue of a serpent and the spots of a leopard and the forelimbs of a deer. So any modern reader, you can kind of figure out that's probably a giraffe. But we decided to just
what if
take
it was
the whole
actually
concept
just
literally.
That?
Somehow the tongue is still there.
And somehow the tongue is still there. So this is Proximo from the top, and
why Proximo? Why that name?
So Proximo was the guy who purchased the giraffes in Gladiator, and there was another fin that sadly Ben's been yelling at me for, but I have it, so it's not lost.
So this kind of I've always liked this kind of taking the exaggerated descriptions that the ancients left us and taking them seriously and being like, no, that's what it's going to be.
Yep.
Unfortunately, the questing beast is really like the best one. A lot of them are just weird.
And all the models we have here today are painted by Ben. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So General Penn, he does hobby stuff for us sometimes. You might see him play on the channel a few times, 40K and stuff. He has a beautiful Salamander army right now. He did all this amazing,
amazing stuff.
All of our display models. And all these are actually the models that all of our
and I break them.
these are the models that all like the pictures on the website of the painted models. That's these. So if you want to get a closer look.
Yeah. So we do have some kind of literal translations. You also have some allegorical translations sometimes. Like I know Frank has mentioned you've kind of got a couple like minotaurs in the lot that are.
Yeah, so we have our bull and rider, Septimus and Nero.
Right.
So that's kind of the fusion of man and bull as the initial concept. Urian was another character that sort of started off as a minotaur and then shifted another direction because we try to mash those things together. And then, like I said, we just keep going with it until we decide we're done. So many people have requested a bona fide Minotaur.
Right.
So
There's still room for it.
yeah. I mean, I would say once we feel like that's the right concept for a character, then it would not be ruled out.
So for those of you people who don't know Arena Rex as well as some of us, you mentioned there were 4 factions. Is that correct?
There's 4 major factions.
Yeah.
Soon to be 5.
So what are those factions? Real quick?
So today we had Ludus Magnus, which are kind of the more traditional style gladiators. They're what remains of the Roman Republic.
Right.
And they focus on that favor mechanic. Legio 13, again, are the sort of Gallo-Roman Empire. They're military gladiators. And so they have some kind of movement shenanigans that they can get up to with their formation tactics.
Right.
Thematically, they're a lot more focused on kind of a legion, the legions.
Right.
But they also kind of bring in some of these Arthurian influences as well, because they're basically like a Roman Empire that exists concurrently with the Republic up in like the like Western Europe, basically up in like Britain and Spain, basically, and that's like Gaius Pallidus is a good example of that. He's basically the Green Knight.
Right.
Is kind of his deal. He's like this kind of legionnaire, this huge legionnaire who's, what they say is like he was terribly wounded and then like resurrected by a druid or something. Whether that's true or if he's just got some kind of giant weird fungal infection in his shoulder, like who knows? We leave that open. That's kind of one of the fun things about how we do a lot of that kind of stuff in the Rex is like maybe it's this crazy mystical thing, or maybe he's just gross.
So the other 2 initial factions that came out kind of the Kickstarter are the Morituri, which are
Zara and Sarah.
Zara and Sarah are a good example of. That's kind of Antony still heads down to Egypt. He and Cleopatra still hook up. They develop sort of a death and resurrection cult.
Still a disaster.
Yes, still a disaster. They develop into sort of a death and resurrection cult that our world is set 500 years after that second triumvirate doesn't form.
Right.
So there's plenty of time for that to evolve. And so they take everything as very serious funerary games and a legitimate chance at resurrection for their monarchies.
Right.
So outside of that,
they have some weird death effects, right? Generally, that's kind of their gimmick.
So the Morituri, their like mechanical thing is every Morituri model has a death effect. So when you mark their last box, it's kind of like Gaius Pallidus, except instead of just like coming back to life or whatever, they'll trigger some kind of weird effect. Like they'll like one of their guys just makes a free attack before he dies, and then like some of the other ones will cause another sometimes they'll cause another model to heal, or push everybody away, or do a bunch of weird stuff.
And they have some ability to do those not while also not
Right. Yeah. One of their faction tactics is they can spend favor to activate a death effect during their clear turn without having somebody die. So when you build a Morituri list, it's kind of like building a spell list almost. They're really interesting.
And the last faction right now.
The last major faction that has yet been released is the Zephyri. So they are sort of our Native American Viking blend.
Right.
In our world, with all these various iterations of people that consider themselves Rome but are at odds with each other, there's nowhere good to go raiding. So the Vikings head west much earlier and sort of develop a trading relationship and a little bit more.
Do we have one of those models we can show off?
Yes, we do.
And one of the things I do really love about another thing I just want to mention quickly while he's getting that is I love that because of how the game works also, but all of the mounted models also have a foot model version. So that's I really appreciate that. You've got Zara on foot.
Yeah, every mounted pair, because they are distinct pairs. Only Zara can ride Sarahcat.
Right.
But yeah, they all have a on foot and mounted version because they can be forcibly dismounted. During combat. Like we talked about it a little bit during development. We're like, I don't know, should they mount or dismount? And we're like, you know what, it's like 6 models to a side, like in a big game. Like we can afford to have that extra level of engagement.
Well, one of the great things is that even though 6 models and there's a lot of detail every cinch, but most of the rules are on their card, and then you've got a little bit of rule book stuff. So it's still a pretty simple game overall.
Do we have a rule book here?
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we have a rule book, but I mean, you can, like we said, you can see the PDF online, and like, we do have physical rule books, but they're little bitty, like 5x5 square books, something like that.
6x6, 48 pages.
6x6.
And half of it is the kind of fluff and world building stuff.
Yeah,
the
right.
rules don't start till the spine, so
Yeah.
So
The
this is
rules
kinda
are
your
not
pretty straightforward.
Viking guy.
Yep. That is actually before we ran the Kickstarter, we did a contest beforehand that was show us your gladiator face, and so he was one of the winners of that contest. That's actually a guy who submitted his piece for us. So that character was
poor fool. Yeah.
Yep, and Vargar.
And this is kind of your
Ben
more
also got
Native
got a
American.
model, too.
Yep.
Alright, so those are the 4 factions, and then Greeks are coming out
Yep.
by Gen Con, you said probably?
That is the plan.
Yep.
Alright.
And we're pretty on schedule for it, so
Alright.
I'm fairly confident that's happening.
And then you do have some kind of sub factions and you've got monsters and things like that, and you can kind of take a monster faction if you want.
Right. So yeah, we have basically 2 sub factions, actually 3 now.
Hold that we previewed
Yeah.
Adepticon.
So yeah, here's some of our prototypes, or I guess the first casts of our Greeks. Right on there. Missed.
Again, I did what I could.
So we've got this is going to be your Reditarii, right?
Yep.
With
So
his,
that's Demetrius, and Argus is the other fella.
Yeah. And all the Greeks are going to be coming with 2 heads as well. They're going to have a helmeted head and a bear head, which is something we're
Which is
trying
not
to
the head of the bear.
Why? So this is a mishmash of Greeks and Ursine culture.
Yes,
I mean,
not the head of a bear.
We've
But
got some
the-
folks who are very, very hyped in chat for the new models.
We
we
are
are
also
also.
But yeah, sub faction wise, we have the Gorgons. So like 3 of our kind of bigger models are the Gorgon sisters, and they're normally factionless. But if you bring all 3 of them together, they have their own faction tactics card. And then there's Anum, who's normally a Morituri model, but he's the Beastmaster. You can take him and only beasts, and that basically that forms another sub faction. And then we lost the camera.
Yes, we did.
And then there's also Cato is our he's the exile. He's one of our newest ones. Yeah, there's that guy right there. He is basically exile. He has a special thing where if you take him and then a cohort that wouldn't qualify for any other faction, so basically a complete mishmash of models, then you can use his special exile faction card, which actually bears mentioning. We haven't really gone into this, but we talk about all these different factions.
Yeah, how do you build real quickly? How do you build a list?
So there's not really points. It's just basically by model, or really more accurately card count, because there are some models that have 2 cards because they're like a little bigger and tougher. So it's basically just by number of stat cards essentially. So like typically, unless you're playing like a stage model, there's Ladon. It's Cato's mount that was asked about earlier. Unless somebody's got something special going on, like it's just going to be like, I'm going to bring 6 models, and you're going to bring 6 models.
There.
Yeah, let me see.
He doesn't sit quite as well.
He's not magnetized or anything, but
most of our mounted models actually sit on the mounts pretty well, but he's not one of them.
yeah, that metal spear throws him a little off balance.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's pretty good.
That's about right.
So yeah.
But yeah, so with the factions, it's totally soft factions, so you can take whatever models you want, basically. Like these are all gladiators. They don't fight for ideology. They fight for money and glory. They'll fight alongside each other just as happily as they'll fight against each other. So you can, if you want, you can literally just pick a selection of models you think are cool and put them into a cohort, and honestly, they'll probably do fine.
Saw that.
But if at least 75% of your gladiator models, which is an important distinction because like Ladon is not a gladiator, Ladon is a lizard. So that Ladon does not.
Wizardess. Yeah.
So Ladon does not count towards that total. As long as 75% of your gladiator models are from the same faction, then you can use that faction's tactics card. So you can easily take, like, if you were playing, Ludus Magnus, and you really liked Sarakit and Zara, you could easily just put them into a Ludus Magnus cohort, and as long as 75% of your gladiators were Ludus Magnus, you could still use their tactics card. So it's actually, the list building is actually very flexible. Most of the time we do see people just play fully in faction, which is great. But there's definitely a lot you can do, either just to like play around with different combinations, or just because you like one faction, except you really like this one model from another faction, you can just splash that in there,
Right,
and kind of do whatever you want.
So pretty easy. You just grab the number of cards you want. Really.
Even if you don't like Kato, you can still take a list that has no faction benefit, and you can have a pretty viable list even without him kind of supplying his own faction. So,
all right. Well, do we have any last questions out there?
We're about out of time too. I was gonna ask you guys, which cons are you gonna be at this year? I know where you're gonna be at Gen Con. Is there anything else?
This weekend, there's Warlord Games Con, so I will be there, and happy to have you stop by if you're in the area and get a chance to. The other thing that we're trying to set up at the moment is War Games Con here, so looks like that's going to be a go this year.
Because it's not concurrent with Gen Con.
Yeah, it's not the same weekend, so we can hopefully get away with that one. So that's the plan for the rest of the year, I think.
Captain Millennium Con.
Yeah, those are all next year.
Okay.
Yep.
Fair enough.
All right, guys. Well, thanks a lot for coming in.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
And what's the website again if they want to check it out?
ArenaRex.com.
Yep.
ArenaRex.com.
Pretty straightforward.
Google Arena Rex, you'll find it.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you later.
Don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.